Let me ask you something. What if you could tuck your brisket in at night, go to bed, and wake up to the smell of barky, smoky, juicy brisket perfection? In this video, I'm showing you the easiest way to smoke a brisket overnight on a pellet grill. From trimming to setting up your smoker so it runs all night, to slicing and serving a smoky brisket that any Texas barbecue joint would be proud to serve. So let's get smoking. It's Friday night and my friends are coming over for dinner tomorrow, so I really have two options. Briskets take anywhere from 10 to 12 hours to cook, so I could wake up tomorrow at 3 a.m., get no sleep, cook it all day, and be completely exhausted by the time my friends show up. Or I could smoke my brisket overnight on my pellet grill while I get a full 8 hours of sleep and I dream about how much my friends will praise me for making the best brisket ever.
This is the best brisket I've ever had. You should open up your own restaurant.
Make love to me, Steven.
I choose sleep. I'm starting with a full packer brisket. I like small briskets around 10 to 12 pounds because they cook faster. I slice off one side, then I can clearly see how thick the fat cap is. I'll then turn it around to the other side and slice the other side of the brisket off. Now I trim the fat cap down to around 1/4 inch thick. The thicker side of the brisket is called the point muscle, and you can leave the fat cap thicker on that side because it tends to render down better than the thinner flat muscle. You want your fat cap relatively thin because you want it to render down. What does that mean? Well, it means that you want it to start caramelizing, turning that ooey gooey caramel brown color that tastes kind of sweet. It tastes much better than white, opaque, hard, unrendered fat. And in a lot of cases, if you don't render your fat cap down and you don't have it thin enough at the outset, then your guests might just peel that hard, unrendered fat right off. So make sure your fat caps are trimmed thin and you'll have no problem rendering them down. And I'm also gonna give you guys a huge pro tip for rendering your fat caps down later in this video. Okay, next I'm slicing the thin end of the flat because it usually curls up and dries out quite a bit. Not very appetizing, so we'll remove that and round out the flat a little bit. And if the mohawk flappy bit on the point here is a little bit too flappy, then I'll cut that down a little bit as well. Finally, I'll flip the brisket over and remove a bit of the hard seam fat on the bottom, but I leave most of it on because it helps the brisket retain moisture. Same deal with the silver skin on the bottom. I leave it mostly on and only remove the bits that are literally about to fall off. Next, I'm pulling out my secret weapon, some brown braising sauce I found at the Asian supermarket. You can use Worcestershire sauce, soy sauce, or seasoning sauce, but I like to switch it up once in a while. There's a ton of umami bomb sauces at Asian grocery stores, so I encourage you to experiment with whatever you can find. Once it's slathered on the bottom, I'm applying some Smoke Trails BBQ brisket rub, a must-have for smoking brisket. It has a great blend of pepper, salt, beef stock, sumac, and other ingredients to really darken up the bark and make briskets taste like they should. It's available on my website, smoketrailsbbq.com or Amazon. Now I'm doing a final light layer of Let's Go general purpose barbecue rub, which goes great on everything, including as a final layer on briskets, getting it fully coated and then flipping the brisket over so I can repeat the same seasoning on the top. The only difference is at the end, I'll add a light layer of kosher salt as well, just so the bark has some big crunchy granules of salt that survive the cook. Beautiful. Now we'll leave this on the counter for a little bit to soak up those spices. Next step, here's where the magic happens. It's around 10 p.m. on Friday and I'm placing the brisket on the pellet grill. You can see that I've placed 2 water pans full of water under the brisket and the brisket is on the top rack. Now, why am I doing that? Well, to explain that, we need to understand a little bit about the thermodynamics of a pellet grill. In your pellet grill, the fire pot burns pellets and shoots heat upwards. The heat hits your metal drip tray pan right away and the drip tray starts slowly absorbing heat. Metal has a much higher specific heat capacity than air, which means it can hold on to a lot more heat than air even at the same temperature. It's why you can stick your hand into a 400-degree oven for at least a few seconds without burning yourself, but if you touch a 400-degree cast iron pan, you're gonna burn your little fingies off. Now that hot drip deflector that's been absorbing all the heat from below is basically acting like a frying pan when your brisket is on the bottom rack. So if you put your brisket on the bottom rack, it is going to get burnt. That drip deflector is shedding a ton of radiant heat into the bottom of your brisket. But here's where physics saves the day. Radiant heat intensity drops fast the farther you get from the source, and not just linearly. It follows the inverse cube law, which means that when you double the distance from the drip deflector, radiant energy drops by a factor of 8. So even getting the brisket literally an inch above the bottom grate will drop the intensity of the radiant heat by a factor of 8, but imagine how much it's going to drop if we put it all the way on the top rack, which is several inches away from the drip deflector. It's going to drop a lot, and it's going to make that radiant heat almost negligible. Next up, water pans. These are your thermal bodyguards. Water has an extremely high specific heat capacity, much greater than steel even, so it can absorb a ton of heat. Not only that, it boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's never going to get to that 300 degree plus temperature level where it starts shedding too much radiant heat into your brisket like a steel plate would. So when we place those water pans on the bottom rack, it ensures that they are absorbing all of that radiant heat from below, and we're just getting nice, gentle, convective heat that's going up and over top of the brisket. Okay, now that your brisket is set up on the pellet grill, set the grill as low as it can go. It should be anywhere from 165 to 185 degrees, depending on what kind of pellet grill you're using. By the way, I'm using smoke and pecan pellets for this cook. They are no joke the smokiest pellets you can get on the market. They're made of 100% pecan shells, which have a much higher lignin content than wood pellets. Wood pellets have cellulose, hemicellulose, and a little bit of lignin, but the lignin is largely responsible for a lot of the smoke flavor that you get, especially from pellets, and these are very high in lignin. As a result, they produce a ton of smoke flavor and color on your brisket. Now, a lot of my viewers have said, no, Steve, you gotta get naughty wood or lumberjack pellets. No, false. These are literally the smokiest pellets you can get on the market because of that high lignin content. You just can't get the amount of smoke that these put out because other pellets are made of wood and these are made of shells. So if you're having trouble getting smoke flavor on your brisket, then get these and you won't have to mess around with anything like pellet tubes or trays to get extra smoke flavor. I'll leave a link to buy them below in the description section. Okay, next step, I just go to bed and let the pellet pooper do the work. Now, I know a lot of barbecue guys that think it's a badge of honor to get up at 3 in the morning and get sleep deprived and cook their brisket all day, and then they barely make it to dinner and they're all effed up and they probably need a nap. But personally, I served in the military for a large portion of my life and I got my fill of sleep deprivation. So I'm done with that, and that's why I love this method so much, because you just set it at 10 p.m. tonight, go to bed, and you let the pellet grill do the work. The next morning, I opened up the smoker at around 8 a.m., and this is what your brisket should look like. Nice dark color, probing around 145 degrees internal. Now I'm taking it off the smoker, placing it on 2 sheets of extra wide heavy-duty aluminum foil, and rolling the edges outward to form a foil boat. And I'll cover the edges of the flat with foil as well, because that tends to dry out quite a bit. Back on the smoker, the brisket goes. Don't forget to refill your water pans with water, by the way. And we're going to bump temps up to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Yes, you heard me, 300 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the trick that I was talking about earlier with respect to fat cap rendering. We want to bump our temperatures up at this point of the cook because we want to render the top of that fat cap, and that requires a little bit higher temperatures. The reason we can get away with these higher temperatures in a pellet grill, which would normally burn our brisket at 300 degrees, especially if we had it on the bottom rack, is because we have the water pans and the brisket is on the top rack. So all of that hot 300 degree air is going up and around the water pans and over top of the brisket and basically air frying the fat cap. 4 hours later at around noon, the brisket looks like this, and it's probing really tender at around 205 degrees Fahrenheit. You want to keep going until you can insert and remove a probe with very little resistance, or better yet, you can get some cotton gloves, put your cotton gloves on, and then put your nitrile gloves over top of them. And then you literally pick the brisket up and you feel underneath it. You poke your fingers through the muscle fibers. And if your fingers easily go through the muscle fibers, there's no resistance, little to no resistance, then the brisket is done. Now, when it gets done is going to be different every time, depending on your brisket, how much collagen content it has, how large it is, a bunch of other different factors. But in any event, it should be done between noon and 3 p.m. at the latest. After it's done, I dump around 80% of the juices in the foil to prevent it from overcooking and over braising as it rests. I then cover it with another sheet of foil tightly and remove it from the smoker and let it rest outside for 2 hours. If you're more than 2 hours away from dinner, you can put it in a cooler. That'll help it retain its heat for longer. Or what I do, because this is a lot easier, I just let the brisket rest down to around 140 degrees Fahrenheit, which usually takes around 2 hours. Then I put it back on the pellet grill as low as the pellet grill can go, and then I just leave it on there until dinner time. Now it's dinner time and my friends are arriving, so all that's left to do is to slice the brisket. To do that, I simply gather everyone around the cutting board to watch as I slice the brisket down the middle, stack it, and squeeze it in front of them to wow them and assert my alpha male dominance. Then I make 1/4-inch slices of the point perpendicular to the first cut all the way until the point is all sliced up. And finally, I make 1/4-inch slices on the flat parallel to the first cut so all the slices are against the grain. Smoky, barky, juicy, and delicious. I probably only spent around 20 minutes of my life of active cooking time on this brisket to produce this result. The pellet grill did the rest of the work. So this method is super easy to do. You're not going to lose any sleep, and the results are perfect every time. Good luck on your next overnight cook, and until next time, happy smoking.